Hey everyone, Greg Staley here from Diverge Media. I apologize for being in work attire, but unlike the mainstream media, we don't receive taxpayer dollars, your taxpayer dollars, to subsidize our media outlet, and therefore we aren't making enough that I can make this a full-time job. So bear with me and the attire. But quick update on the scandal that mainstream media won't touch. Trudeau is involved and embroiled in another scandal, and the mainstream media won't touch it. And in fact, all MPs in Canada have been sent this story, and to date, only one has gotten back to us, and none of them have actually committed to do anything with the information. So, what is the story? Well, the RCMP was handed evidence on December 2nd of 2020 that indicated that the shoot down of PS 752, a passenger flight, a civilian flight, containing 176 passengers, 55 Canadian citizens, plus 30 permanent residents, and 138 people in total with ties to Canada, was shot down by two Iranian missiles. On December 2nd, evidence was handed to the RCMP of 2020, December 2nd of 2020. The RCMP was handed evidence that indicated that the shoot down was intentional. But this did not stop Justin Trudeau from inserting his preferred political outcome into the narrative. What do I mean by that? Instead of reporting that there is evidence that needs to be followed up on, that there was evidence of premeditation, you could say, well, we don't know if the evidence is any good or not. But just so you know, the evidence came from a senior Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps source, and this evidence was ignored. That was the evidence that the RCMP was handed on December 2nd of 2020. Well, on June 24th of 2021, roughly 7 months later, the Prime Minister came out and parroted the findings of the Jaworski report. Now, the Jaworski report is a government report that was talking about the PS 752 findings. They had a forensic team, did a bunch of research. And what did they say? They said, we found no evidence. We found no evidence that the shoot down of PS 752 was premeditated. Really? You found no evidence that the shoot down was premeditated, even though the RCMP was handed evidence on December 2nd of 2020? Now, just to put this in perspective of the political interference allegations coming out of Nova Scotia, this happened 4 months before that happened in Nova Scotia. And to add a little more salt in the wound of the RCMP political interference allegations, the RCMP commissioner, Brenda Lucki, is under NSIRA, that is the National Security and Intelligence Review Agency investigation, for her refusal to open a criminal investigation into the downing of PS 752, the same civilian flight that Trudeau ignored evidence on, because it had, quote, national security implications. It was referred from the CCRA, I believe it's Civilian Review and Complaints Commission, CRCC. They referred it off to NSIRA because they said, we can't touch it. It has national security implications. It now sits there, and to my knowledge, they're investigating it. All this to say, I sent this to the mainstream media, every single person I could think to send it to. And the only response I got back, there's two. One was Alex Pearson. She's no longer in the mainstream media. She used to work, I believe, for CBC and Global, or maybe she's part of Global now, but AM 640 is her radio station. She covered it in one segment. I was disappointed that she didn't continue to push it and that she didn't refer it off to other outlets. But at least she touched it. She had the courage to actually follow up on the evidence that was presented to her, follow up with the sources that we presented, which, by the way, this story, just for those who want to dismiss it out of hand because it's some guy like me who put it forward, was put together with the help of a former detective of the RCMP. That former detective would be Andy Brooke. So again, we put this evidence together, or put this story together, drop it in the laps of all 338 MPs. The only MP who got back to us in any way, shape, or form, not Maxime Bernier even, okay, was Leslyn Lewis. Or sorry, not Leslyn Lewis, not Maxime Bernier, but Pierre Pelevre. Pierre Pelevre responded and just acknowledged that they had received it. That's it. I don't understand why the opposition wouldn't be chomping at the bit to show you another example of how this prime minister is putting his own personal ego above that of the Canadian people, above justice. Now, what do I mean by that? Trudeau, ever since, before he was ever prime minister, said he wanted to reestablish relations with Iran. Oh, okay. He said Harper, he was doing it wrong. He had all these ideological reasons that he closed down the embassy. Harper closed down the embassy because it wasn't safe. But he goes, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do things based on practical basis. I'm going to have foreign policy based on practical reasons, not ideological reasons. And then Dion in 2016, as foreign minister, further indicated the same and said that nothing good has come out of the closure of the embassy. Well, then flash forward, and 3 days after the shoot down of this civilian flight, the prime minister takes selfies with victims of the families, or the family members of the victims, and then he says, sorry, Deanna, yeah, hopefully that's better. Then he says, I won't stop until we get, I'll fight until we get justice and accountability. Really? You'll fight till you get justice and accountability. Is that why the counsel for the attorney general asked that the decision, the seeking of default judgment against Iran, is that why your counsel asked that be dismissed? And what I'm referring to is the Justice Bellababa case, where Justice Bellababa indicated that the shoot down of PS 752 was an intentional act of terrorism. Well, lo and behold, the prime minister's attorney general, the counsel for the attorney general, goes in and says, I want that dismissed, even though they hadn't sought intervening status on the case. Meaning they didn't really have a legal reason to even indicate that they wanted that, but they still tried. So all this is going on. It's been sent to every MP and no one seems interested. And then we send it off to Maxime Bernier. No answer. And listen, I've been silent about this, about calling out the lack of coverage on this for a better part of 3 weeks. We did a 4-part series. There's a lot more findings in this, including we have communications between us and the RCMP that indicated that they're still confident in Ukraine to conduct the criminal investigation. They don't see any need to open a Canadian-led RCMP criminal investigation. Well, let me put this in a different perspective. As a former RCMP officer said to me, do you think it's likely if the RCMP here in Canada launched a criminal investigation into Iran, who we know, because it's been admitted, that they shot 2 missiles at a passenger civilian flight, do you think they escape being listed as a terrorist entity, the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps? Do you think they escape being listed as a terrorist entity? And if they were listed as a terrorist entity, what do you think the likelihood is that the Canadian government would be able to reestablish embassy relations with Iran? Probably not good. So one of the things that might happen, if you really wanted to keep that possibility open, is you might just not open a criminal investigation here in Canada. Keep in mind, this happened 4 months prior to Nova Scotia, where the political interference allegations have come out of and all the information that's coming out of the Mass Casualty Commission. Pardon my frustration. I'm a little bit angry. These people lost everything. They lost sons, daughters, fathers, wives. They lost their lives that day. The Prime Minister had the audacity to stick his arm around these people and look them in the eye, take selfies with them, because he's got to get the selfies for the PR. He had the audacity to take pictures with them, say, I'll fight for justice and accountability. Meanwhile, his counsel for the Attorney General asked that a decision that indicated that this was an intentional act of terrorism, when they go to collect on the assets, we want that to be dismissed. Default motion for judgment, just so we know. Well, let's dismiss that. Okay, seems like you're really fighting for justice. Oh, and by the way, I'm also going to ignore evidence that this was indeed premeditated from what is believed to be a senior Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps source. I'm going to ignore that evidence and 7 months later go out in front of the media and parrot the findings of the Jaworski report that says we found no evidence of premeditation. I don't think this, again, you're going to pretend like we're fighting for justice when this is your actions behind the scenes. You're going to pretend like you give a damn about these people when this is your actions behind the scenes. But my frustration extends beyond the Prime Minister, because where's the mainstream media? Why aren't you doing your job? This has been dropped in the laps of every outlet I can think of. By the way, I used to have strong, I used to think the independent media did a really good job of filling the gaps where the mainstream media didn't do their job or didn't cover things the way they should. This has also been sent to every independent outlet I can think of. And the only one that has bothered to pick it up, and kudos to them, It's the National Telegraph, who has personally helped me behind the scenes in sending this out to people and trying to get it into as many people's purview as possible. So let's just back this up. All MPs in Canada have been notified of this scandal that was put together. This story was put together with a former detective of the RCMP. And so far, nothing, yawns, crickets, one response out of all 338 MPs, and it comes from Pierre Poilievre, whose team merely just acknowledged that they had received it. So far, nothing else has come out of that. Maxime Bernier has been sent this story. Nothing. I don't understand. We have a Trudeau scandal. Why aren't we chomping at the bits to show the world what kind of man our prime minister is? The kind of man who 3 days after the shoot down of a civilian flight with 2 Iranian missiles throws his arms around a grieving father and says, I'll fight for justice and accountability. I won't stop. That's the kind of prime minister he is. And then he turns around, ignores evidence that it was premeditated, and has his counsel for the attorney general seek a dismissal on a court case, the Bellababa court case. I don't know why the media here in Canada is silent, but I can tell you this story is being heavily censored. Our numbers here, and I haven't talked about any of this publicly, but we might as well while we have the opportunity. My numbers on my website and on my social media have dropped to levels that I have not seen since I started my outlet 2 years ago when no one knew our name. I don't find it coincidental that people that I know personally who say, hey, when I share your stuff, it doesn't get nearly the traction of the stuff we get. And then the independent media that I thought, they all follow me, by the way, like True North, Rebel, Andrew Lawton, Post Millennial, all follow Diverge Media. I thought for sure when I sent this directly to their newsrooms, tagged them, etc., that there would be some movement, that they would see the value in this scandal of a prime minister ignoring evidence for what appears to be to suit his own political desires. I don't know what it's going to take to shake the tree of the media here in Canada to do their job. But if we dismiss information because of the person who presented it, not based on the quality of the information, but based on the appearance or maybe the fact that they're an independent, then you're not qualified to do your job as a journalist, because your job is to be able to decipher good information from bad. We put it together a story with a former detective of the RCMP showing that the prime minister appears to have put his own political desires above justice, his own political desires to establish relations with a terror-supporting state above justice for Canadian citizens, right? Because a Canadian's a Canadian's a Canadian. It doesn't matter where they're from. If they're a Canadian, they're a Canadian, they're a Canadian, right, Prime Minister? I'll just close it out by saying thank you for tuning in. Please share this out. We are struggling to get beyond the algorithm. And so it's going to take individuals such as yourself watching this, putting it in the hands of other people, direct messaging them, sharing it out. Can't do it without you. This story's been out for over 3 weeks. There's a 4-part series you can look into, including all sorts of information like the RCMP saying they have the utmost confidence in Ukraine to conduct the criminal investigation, despite the fact that, I don't know, they're at war. Maybe start there. Or the fact that maybe they just fired their prosecutor general over treason concerns. Or the fact that the Ukrainian airliner that was actually involved in the shoot down of PS 752, they're actually using Ontario courts to sue Iran. But it must be because they're so qualified and in a position in their country right now to investigate these things. I know there's good Canadian people out there everywhere that will help put this story out, and I continue to have faith that if we keep pushing, it will break through. So thank you for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Greg Staley of Diverge Media.